thank you all for taking a little bit of time. I know it's tough at the end of the day, but I'm Scott. I'm with EBSCO. I've been with EBSCO for just short of 30 years. I head up our library relations area as well as government relations. For those who are interested, the government side is an interesting thing. It's very much focused on intellectual freedom. So I've been working with lobbyists, senators, other. Let me shut this. Is to try to influence legislation in a positive way for libraries, and so that's been interesting. Kind of separate. The library relations side is really about getting closer to the community and trying to do the things that we can potentially do to help see what you all are trying to do. Make it to fruition. And so that's what this is about. I wanted to just call out, we had proposed a project to NISO that's been accepted. I'll talk this through. I didn't do this alone. This comes from sort of instigated by many members of the community saying, hey, we need something like this, that I'll get into what it's all about. But co-authored a proposal to NISO with Russell Palmer from Galileo and Eric Radio from Colorado Boulder. And we'll talk a little bit about what it's all about and hopefully make this interactive. Okay. Anybody get a sense?
I saw Zoom slide control. I do.
All right, we're gonna do it differently then, I guess. I'm gonna go this route. Okay, so talk a little about the goals behind the Open ILS Initiative. The statement of work for the actual proposal to NISO, how you might be able to get involved, and then get into any thoughts. So what is it?
Sorry,
yeah, please.
What's NISO?
Oh, I'm sorry. NISO is the National Information Standards Organization. It is based, primarily in the States. However, it's got global reach as far as what they do. We'll talk a little bit about that. Don't have to be members to participate. So we'll get into that, but thank you. Sorry for that. So the Open ILS Initiative, we came at this with this idea that, hey, y'all are building software tools, whether they're open or not, that require, in many cases, some level of integration. How does this talk to that? Can I use an API to make a connection to this system or that system? If I'm using whatever it may be, in this case, the ILS, we actually started on a broader scale, and we narrowed our focus down to the ILS, saying, hey, if the ILS is the center of the universe, if you will, or the LSP, what does it need to connect to and how can we remove obstacles around that so that the work that you all are doing can have a greater impact? And so that's the concept. It will come in phases. Iteration number one is a recommended practice for interconnectivity. And it's designed to encompass the technical needs, definition of terms. What do we mean when we say open, for example? Something's open for one organization, it may mean something different for another. And then the overall transparency. What can you do? What do you have the rights to do? What do they allow you to connect to? How can you use this API? Is it supported? Can a vendor that you're working with use the API of another vendor to help you to make connections, those kinds of things. I mentioned the folks behind it. Thanks to these folks for working it through. We're not alone. We're just kind of facilitating. I thought I'd just start with the question. We're all here kind of, I figured when I was thinking about this, we're going to an open conference, right? And maybe I'm sort of preaching to the choir, if you will, right? So the ideas of how do we further accelerate an open environment. So I'm curious, we'll talk a little bit about the obstacles, but what do you all think about, when you think about open, what do you hope to accomplish? And what do you see the community wanting to be, or are there tools or pieces that you'd like to see happen that'll be more positive as we go forward? Anybody have any thoughts? Any words that come to mind?
It's all about contribution. That's really happening now. That's the most positive important point.
Contribution. Awesome. Anybody else?
Competition.
Competition breeds good things, right? Hopefully, innovation. Anyone else?
Contradiction in the sense that, when you think of open, you think of free.
Mhm.
But in some instances, you come to a conference like this and you realize there are certain gaps in terms of your organizational chart that you will need finance to fund.
Mhm.
So contradictory,
Yeah,
there's some
open,
contradictions there.
open source doesn't mean free kind of thing,
That's right.
okay?
Standards, dare I say?
Standards, that's what we're hoping to get a little closer to. Simplify things maybe,
Think sharing and support, so even if things are open, we need to know how to do it, and you need to be able to find the information to know how to connect and
Yeah.
manage it.
yeah, great. Anyone else? I know I'm not really looking at the chat here, I don't know if anybody's chatting, but please feel free to, or chime in if you're on the line. All right, get the point. I think, some of the stuff for us is around, or for me, as we think about this, is around flexibility and the freedom to sort of create the environments that y'all want in your libraries, whatever that may be. And for us as the vendor community to do the things that we need to do to support it, or at least let you know where we stand on certain, elements and issues. So I did put a lot of content in here, that a lot of it comes directly from the proposal that was accepted. But why are we doing this? Because y'all have unique needs, doing what you're trying to do, upholding your mission, building out the libraries and tools and services that you need to build out. And all the pieces and tools that you may use could be totally different from your neighbors. And so there's all kinds of combinations, but when you try to do those integrating disparate pieces, it comes with its challenges, right? So sometimes it's closed infrastructures, there's technical limitations, there's no standardization on how we do these things, how we connect, restrictions. You can do this, but you can't do that. Some of that we see is stuff around, we have an API and it can be used to make this connection. However, we won't allow you to do that because that's you're gonna plug in a tool that we wanted to sell you our version of that tool, and is that appropriate? So system restrictions, what are your rights and capabilities? What is the support you get? How do you know about that? So that's really about clarity, transparency. And then some of the confusion around the terms. So, what does it mean when you say it's open? Open to me to do as I choose, or open to the things that you all might say it's open to? So some of those concerns. As I said, we sort of ended up focusing on the ILS. We tried to come at this in a broader software in the library ecosystem. We ended up narrowing it down, why it's called the Open ILS Initiative. What are these things that want to touch it through the LSP? And so that's where this ends up being, but it is largely that sort of, maybe that hub that wants to talk to and receive information and push information out to help you. So there's consolidation. I remember the early part of some of the conversations, even the early parts of Folio. Where did it stem from? And that was around, hey, there are issues, there's consolidation happening in the industry, different folks buying. There's not many options here. And when that happens, sometimes the business practices change the way you can do what you want to do. And so reduced choice, maybe you have a lack of flexibility. The biggest thing maybe is, as we look forward, how do we create an innovative environment that actually entices new folks to come into our marketplace and give you options, and because they can plug and play into an environment that's not closed. So I think that's a lot of what we try to do. Those are principles of open source, but can we make them more pervasive? Degrading service and support, yeah, you can try that, but we're not really going to help you, or we're not going to see that it's as good as it could be, maybe. Again, limiting market entrance, and then even budget impacts. Budget impacts is an interesting one. We talk about open source. Is open source a way to potentially, in the long run, reduce costs? But some of the other kinds of things, we'll talk a little bit about some of the ways that, budgets become problematic, potentially. But it's really about expanding on the concept of open principles. And so this project, or the ILS, the Open ILS Initiative with NISO, is not an open source project. But it's about those underlying principles of what you think about with open source. Can we do that with open source or proprietary type materials or services, applications? So it's about interoperability permeating across. Doesn't matter if it's open source or if it's not. And again, clarity and transparency, identifying technical needs and elements for, you know, those integrations. What do we need to have happen? We facilitate the choice and flexibility. And again, awareness of costs for APIs, things like that. You can do that, but it's going to cost you something, even though that API, you know, might be available. So financial implications. This is all part of what was accepted as a proposal. So I'm going to start to go down there. So the first part of the first phase of this is this recommended practice. Again, around awareness, conformance, and adoption. So the you know, what we want to be able to do is to have visibility into the kinds of things that you can do with different software tools, and we need to outline what those are. So it'll be the as this says, the precursor to following on working groups that would get more into the technical details once we've outlined basically the scope of the project. Here's the statement of work. Visibility, clarity, conformance, optimize interoperability around the ILS, and support the various parties involved. And so, you know, that could be you all, that could be your vendors, that could be service providers. Can they use these tools and do what they like to do? Outline areas of need and propose approaches to address the roadblocks. Identify critical applications. What are those tools? What are those pieces of software that you need to make sure talk well and integrate well with your ILS or your LSP? And I think overall, making sure that we all understand what we're getting into. That transparency is pretty critical. I think we've seen a lot of folks say, well, I started to do this and I thought I was going to be able to do X, but it turns out I can't. We've even seen, and you know, this is a tough one, we've seen folks actually try to use an open API to integrate service number 1 with service number 2 and receive a legal cease and desist letter saying, you can't do that. Think about that, right? That's real. So availability, transparency. Some of the interesting things in here is third-party service providers. Can we use those APIs? If you know, if EBSCO is servicing a folio installation and you want to put a proprietary software application to have it talk to that, and you have APIs, can we help you? Can we use the API? Maybe yes, maybe no. And so, you know, let's see what we can do about bringing that to light and hopefully starting to get past some of those business things that might limit us. So good faith efforts to support the decisions by libraries, reasonable maintenance to uphold the connections. So yeah, you made your connection, but I don't care. I'm going to change my code here, or we're going to issue some update and it's going to break what you have, but we don't care. So are there ways for us to sort of alleviate some of those kinds of things? And then the consortial environments as well. What do they need? What does it mean? Parameters, limitations, and so on. A lot of it is about APIs. So there's a focus on APIs. We need APIs to make sure that you know, data is exchanged. You all understand the basics, but we need APIs, and we need to uphold the APIs, the use of the APIs, the value of those, to be able to continue to sort of make these integrations possible. So right out of the gate, list of systems. What are we talking about here? What needs to integrate? So this is sort of our initial list of what those may be. But part of the job of the working group that we're looking to establish. So now that this thing has been voted in, and I'll tell you this, for all the NISO members who voted in this proposal, all the people who did vote, voted yes. We want this. We want this to be a thing. So it's important in the community to make sure that we can do these kinds of things, that we remove some of the obstacles. One of the things is, all right, well, here are some of the types of resources that we may want to integrate. It's not meant to be an exhaustive list. It's meant to say, let's talk about this. And when we have that working group in place to do this first round, we start to look more closely at this. What do these things need to be? Because then we can start to talk about, all right, how do we make that stuff work? Who are the folks behind some of these? what are their practices and policies that we want to bring transparency to, that kind of thing. So you can start to see the sort of practicality in some of the ideas we're saying. The working group would analyze also the existing landscape. Stuff I'm talking about, best practices, availability of APIs, do we have the documentation and training that we need to utilize these things, and so on. Middleware is an interesting one to think about. Are there middleware opportunities in all of this? What does that mean? Maybe a folio kind of an element involved, given we're at this conference. And again, some of the transparency that we need to see. Definitions of terms, what it actually means when we say this. What are the allowances or disallowances on those use APIs? So again, similar ideas. Financial concerns and considerations around forced bundles. One of the things that I've always found interesting is, you know, you go into a new contract and you have, the services bundled together around maybe a proprietary or closed system. And the cost for that for you is X. Okay, well, what if I don't want component B? Well, the cost is still X. That costs 0. And we know there's a cost to it. And so, but if that's the case and you say, well, I'd like to plug in application X, doesn't matter what. And in order for me to I want to remove that. I don't want to pay for it. I want to bring in this other tool and plug it in. Well, you don't save any money. So now in theory, you're thinking, not only do I have to pay to do what I need to do, I'm actually paying twice because I know there's a dollar figure associated with that. And so some of those considerations around forced bundles, how do we bring that to light a little bit so folks understand, yeah, you have the flexibility, but in reality, you don't. So does that make sense to folks? And so some of the, you okay?
I'm just trying not to cough.
Hey, let it out. And please, if anybody has comments or thoughts, throw them out there. We'll get just a couple more slides. We can open it up for thoughts, but expected outcomes. This comes directly from the proposal. Support library goals and desired approaches. That's what we hope to get. Flexibility, choice, ease of use. Your thing should be your thing. You know, how do you want to develop your systems and services in your ecosystem? Transparency around the availability of the APIs and the levels of allowance and support, and the definition of terms. Conformance and recommended practices and terminology. When I say conformance, do you allow this? Do you allow that? What is your stance on use of this for that? So that we have a clear understanding from, different players, what it is that they're, that you can do when you use a tool, rather than something general, like it's open. And then you realize in the fine print that it isn't. For example, we've seen in environments where there's an API available to make an interconnection, but you can't use the API, but you can use this data technology to try to do the thing that you were trying to do. Because it's not going to be that good, and we hope you don't really like it, so that you come back and use the other tool from us. Those kinds of things. I don't think there's a place for that in our community. Promote greater value across platforms, break down some of the obstacles that exist across the systems, generate that clarity, and then hopefully, as we go, leading to some level of standardization. How hard is it that everything works a little bit differently? When we have identified the systems and the applications, are there ways to get closer to simplifying those integrations in different ways? Now, those are going to be smarter technical folks than me in the different rounds of these iterations, but that's kind of next phase goals. We've identified it, we've brought to light some of these things. It's transparency around it. The community understands the problem. Okay, how do we address it from a technical perspective? Ensure upfront and ongoing understanding of details around the interoperability with other systems and parties. Can we use it? And hopefully we're really pushing to a larger sort of community approach. Hey, we're all in this thing together. Part of what we believe, and this may be a shift from EBSCO's thought process from years back, but if we can sort of, rather than try to hold a big piece of a smaller pie, if you will. How do we look to expand the value, help libraries become successful, bring on that innovation, let new people come in, allow you to do things, maybe then we can see this thing flourish and grow. And then as a result, we then can too. So we want to have that sort of thought process, at least from my perspective, from an EBSCO perspective, permeate across the community. And hopefully we get to bigger and better places. So I should have maybe had these slides first, but a little bit of context about NISO. National Information Standard Organization. Actually, that is reverse. But it's really about, they bring all members of the community in, libraries, publishers, vendors, whatever, service providers, to engage across and solve problems of mutual interest. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to be that sort of, that agnostic place to do things like this. Global project. I talked to the folks at NISO before I said, hey, I'm going to do this presentation. Let's make sure that we're covering what you want to make sure happens. And they really want to emphasize it's a global project. NISO members or non-members can participate. So if somebody, you or your staff members or others that would like to be part of this Open ILS initiative and start to identify and really draft where we're going with this, it doesn't matter where you live or if you're part of NISO. So the idea is to create a balanced, solution considering the entire community. And so the way that it works, I take part in some NISO programs. I know others in the room do as well. But you get direct input into the output. That was a quote from them. First phase, we're looking to set the groundwork and the principles here. This shouldn't, what we're trying to do, one of the things that I think is that things move kind of slowly. So if we chunk it out, we can do it in like manageable increments. And so this first phase of the project hopefully really sets the stage for where this needs to go, and won't take too long. We're probably looking at 15 to 20 person working group to get this rolling in phase one, whoever they may be, a balanced perspective. Probably takes somewhere between 18 and 24 months to get it done. That's sort of the guess. We're looking at meeting once or twice a month. We're kind of doing the things you sort of take back your mini homework assignments as you can, and move it forward. But there's always a comment period too. So when the recommended practice comes out, the draft of it, the community gets to have a look and comment on it. So even if you didn't participate, you can still see where we're at and add your thoughts. So, overall, I think, we're at a place where the work that y'all are doing can, I hear the words movement, right? Like this is the open movement. Well, when we get to a point when it's no longer a movement and it's pervasive, this is some way to say, all the individual things and all the work that we're doing, all the concepts that we might have and all the nitty gritty that I've seen today and that we're going to keep seeing here, can we take it and elevate it in a larger way and start to bring a little bit more, acceleration to the concepts of open. So, any questions or thoughts? For those online too? I'm looking at the chat. Feel free to type in there or unmute yourself.
Well, Scott, can you talk a little bit about kind of potential disagreements? How do you imagine thinking forwards, about different definitions of openness or, things like that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that there's going to be disagreements and everybody's, people are going to come at it, organizations going to come at it from a different perspective. But I think fundamentally, it's not about forcing somebody to do something. It's about understanding the benefits of it, understanding how libraries may see it, but then also just being transparent about it. So if you, Boaz, created a tool and you say, no way, it can't integrate with EBSCO stuff. Well, Boaz's tool, he said no. This is the story when it comes to your API. These are his rules. So do you conform to what we think might be the best practice? No, but what do you do then? You have an opportunity to say. And so then at least when I'm thinking about purchasing Boaz's tool, I'll know that I can't do X or Y, but I am allowed to do A and B. So it's the transparency around that. It's not forcing the hand, but hopefully as we see these things come through and folks start to see that it's perhaps in your best interest in the long run to join the party, that maybe we'll have more movement, but it will bring at least visibility into that. So there'll be disagreements for sure.
To build on that point, I think there will definitely be disagreements in terms of some of the smaller system vendors that serve public libraries. I think some of the larger system vendors for academics and research libraries will probably be very interested in this. Many of them are already working in these ways. And so I'm really curious about, I'm thinking about a, say, a statewide resource sharing implementation that where libraries may use one over 20 different systems. And the academics, again, are really leaning in toward APIs. Public library vendors maybe not so much. So having examples like this to follow good practice maybe could help educate more public libraries about the power of open approaches and APIs that might get them leverage with their vendors.
Great.
Whether those vendors will actually do anything about it is a difference.
Well, I think the nice thing too is, and I don't know if Russell's on the line, I know some folks from Galileo on the line, but they think about this too, right? So they're serving multi-library types, and I think what we need when you go back to making sure that we have a variety of folks taking part is that we do have public library representation, consortium representation, so on.
Could be thinking of some sort of scorecard at the end where someone is less closed, they get maybe a turkey, where something's more open, they get an eagle or something.
I don't know. That's a good point. I think that ends up coming through the group. So let's just say we assemble all of us in the room, decide we're on a working group. We can determine how that goes. I think that's the premise. But I like turkeys.
So, just to make sure I'm clear, you have not yet formed a working group, you're
No.
looking at that, and then that first piece is going to take 18 to 24 months?
Yeah,
That's just the definitions?
It's the definitions, it's the understanding, it's building out those conformance statements, determining what we are asking people to fill in and tell us. It's determining what are those components of the various systems that we want to focus on, all those kinds of things. But yes, so it's just
how long for the whole?
these are projects, it's going to take a bit.
Sorry.
And let me take it back. We submitted, my colleagues and I submitted to NISO. I'm gonna say, and I reached out to a number of folks just to understand, BOAS being one back in the day, is this important to you? How important is this to you before we go down this pathway? And we had a lot of folks globally, European, Asian, North American folks, Latin American folks saying we need this to move things forward in a different way. I'd say then we put our first proposal in front of NISO and their groups 3.5 years ago. This was voted in October of last year. And they have some change and they have some things going on, but we're hoping to facilitate and accelerate this a little bit. So it's not a rapid moving thing, but so yeah, so we did that. This was voted in, like I said, so it took a little bit, iterations, it's voted in as yes. So now it's a project under NISO. Next phase is let's create working group to get this thing done. And so the sooner that we do that, sooner we can move on to phase 2 and what that might look like as we start to flesh that out. Oh, thank you. I hope it's like a helpful answer because would you expect this NISO specification to end up in RFPs for larger libraries? I would imagine so. We've seen that happen. I used to head up the groups that handle RFPs at EBSCO, and we definitely saw that happen with other NISO initiatives. So, Joshua, good question, and yeah, I'd imagine so. And that really depends on you all, but does it matter? We want to see how well do you conform to the recommended practice of the NISO Open ILS Initiative. If that's something that you care about, put those questions in your in your RFPs. But yeah, we've seen that in the past. I imagine we'll continue to see it.
I really like the scorecard idea, and the RFP is kind of good.
Yeah, I do too.
Forward. is there, like you were saying something like it started from a bigger project and then kind of ended up as an ILS? Can you say a little bit about that bigger kind of?
Yeah, we didn't come in focused. We came in saying we have an interoperability thing that we need to address. So we want to, and just, if you just eliminate the idea of the ILS as the focus of this, we came in with the same concepts, but saying it doesn't matter what you're trying to connect. You should be able to do it. And the group was like, whoa, that's enormous, and so, not that the ILS makes it small, because there's a lot of obvious components, but I think that's where the crux of the issue was too. So we were okay with doing that. It's really, when there's a system that's closed, it's focused around the ILS, that's where those walls tend to be.
Is data likely to be in scope? I think we heard Andreas say today is you have your open systems, but without open data, it doesn't matter. The two can't be separated.
Yeah.
Have you thought about that so far?
Yeah, and I think that's part of what we'll put into this first thing. We're talking about the exchange of data, so and there are other initiatives with NISO that sort of hit on that topic as well, but again, the full scope of what this is and what it needs to be is still sort of, it's going to be up to that working group, which is why, in part what I'm doing is trying to say, we want some really good, smart people who care about this topic to come together and figure out what it should be. And then we go to the next level of folks who are going to be like, all right, what does that mean technically and so on. Hopefully, what I'm trying to do is take what we're all doing in this closed environment as open, the WOLFcon thing, and make it big so that we can take what the ideas are here and make them broad.
There was another initiative in 2008, correct? By NISO for the integrated line system. Am I correct?
Probably lots, and maybe others here know more. What's that one?
Yeah, I just wanted to understand is this initiative a kind of phase 2 for the other initiative which come up, and then before you came out after this initiative, is that another phase or it's?
No, this isn't second to anything that was there. This is the first thing that this is a standalone proposal that was accepted as something that they're gonna, make a project. But no, there wasn't. This is phase 1 of a unique proposal.
Because when I searched for the title of the initiative, I found on the internet that it was announced by NISO on 2008.
Oh yes, see,
Like what?
2000 and what? Oh no, definitely not that. See, the problem hasn't changed, so we need to. I don't know what that is, but yeah, we have a problem, right? Any other thoughts?
Yeah, my understanding, so how come this is happening now so late, sorry, so my name is Julie Bickel, I'm the project manager at the University Library of the LMU in Munich, in Germany, and my job is to get them from the old system to folio. And already then, their first thought was, oh, well, data migration, right? And said, but if everything else doesn't work, like exporting to the financial system or the other, the hardware that we use in circulation, it's also like, we can move to folio, but you still can't do the work. Like many libraries have moved already to folio and other systems that are more or less open, but why is this topic of interoperability only coming up now? I guess it feels late because it feels like it would be a sister. I know that folio or library systems is only an example in this, but it doesn't feel like a new topic. Is it just that the libraries or organizations that were big enough to handle all the proprietary third parties dealt with it, or somehow there's just so many more third party softwares, hardware, other things than before?
It's a good question. I can give you my take, and I'm sure others have a take on that. As I see it, as APIs became more available, and there we have the capabilities to integrate, but business practices, by and large, held us back from that. Right around the time as folio starts to come to be, and it takes a while to get there, right? And then we saw this morning, I think, there's 25 libraries or something like that, I'll pull it. And remember, as we start to do that, we start to see, hold on, so I want to use this tool, but you won't let me with that one. And things start to happen, Folio starts to come from that. We start to say, it's bigger, and we got to make a bigger change. Because it can't just be if you use Folio, these things work. And even if you use Folio, you might not be able to make things work, right? So and again, I said 3 years. I don't know when we submitted this to NISO, but it's been a little while. And so, yeah, it's not a new concept, but the problems persist. And so let's get it out there in a real way. And then, and what I see with any of these things, it's really about those involved. If Tom is interested in these kinds of things, if you're interested in these kinds of things, I think we can make a difference because we have our networks and we have the ability to sort of do some things. NISO gives us that shell and that sort of thing to do it under. But we're the ones who can make it. It's just like the OLF, right? We can make it real. But yeah, it's an old school problem that still persists. Yeah.
Just one observation is you said that you called out technical interoperability a couple of times, which I think is right up NISO's alley, but what I didn't see was legal interoperability. And maybe you're avoiding that on purpose, and then some business interoperability or business compatibility.
The legal terms was in the initial proposals. This is what your terms kind of should be. Let's talk about that. And NISO was like, that's not really our game. And so that's where it leads to more transparency and conformance. Hey, as a community, we believe this is the way that you should approach doing this and doing this and doing this and doing this. How well do you do that? If the answer is yes, good. If the answer is no straight up, okay. If the answer is maybe, define what that means, and so then you have a picture, hey, I'm about to buy that and I want to plug it into that. Well, let me look at this thing, or let me use the RFP as was brought up to see if that works. Yeah, it'll work good. I should be good with doing the things I want to do. Or no, maybe I have a problem. So yeah, the terms and conditions, the more legal language was something that we sort of softened a little bit.
But I guess that's harder also to manage on a global scale, right? Like every country, and in our case, like it feels like every land
Probably all different.
things differently anyway.
And I think that's part of it. But I think we can sort of accomplish the same goal. We need to understand what your terms are in some fashion without it being, true legal documents, or if you will, a contract.
It does seem like it'd be pretty easy to come up with user stories or case studies, like Library X wanted to connect this to that, and they couldn't, not because it didn't work technically, but because of these reasons. I mean,
There are lots of
should
those.
be pretty easy.
There
I
are.
don't think that'll take 18 to 24 months.
Yeah, and I say 18, 24 months because you gotta do it, we gotta have volunteers, and that's the time frame that they said. Depends on how motivated the group is.
I think there's a fair bit of pain out there right now.
Yeah.
It's a very contemporary problem.
Yeah. Well,
Yes, I have to sort of cycle through some of this before I can remember interoperability questions being when I started working in libraries back in the dark ages. But it's also possibly that most libraries use large or small for the publics, but turnkey systems, and they were more built in self-contained.
Yeah.
Whereas libraries started very much when they moved into computers, building their own. They were able to connect bits together and plug this into that, because they wrote the bits that plugged A into B, into then into X and into Y. As the main turnkey systems came in, became self-contained, libraries moved to that. You couldn't plug A into B because you had A and B of sorts into your turnkey system and you just stay there. Things consolidated, and now perhaps libraries have sort of started going back into that circle of, well, folks, we should start writing some of our own bits again. So we can plug A into B and then into M and N, because that's actually what we want to do now.
Yeah.
And the system that we have had and the system that we are all used to won't facilitate that as well as they potentially could for whatever reason, whether it's technical, usually not business.
Yeah, we'll come back around, but it feels to me, I mean, even just being here, that we're in a different space, we're a different place, we're a different mindset, and you know, maybe that's part of that middleware piece that you said, you know, and maybe that its role in some of this can be valuable. Not entirely sure, but yeah, it's not a new problem, but it hasn't been solved, and it feels like we're at a point where, you know, it goes from, in my view, you know, this fear of open source, right? Like if you're not a library with big resources and big technical staff, we did surveys on this from EBSCO's perspective. What do you think about open source? Love it, love the concept. Would you use it at your library? No. Well, why? Because I can't, how am I gonna do that? And so comes up service models and the idea of service, and someone else can take care of that for you if you don't have the ability to do it. And we're all thinking, well, what does that give us? Well, it gives you choice, it gives you flexibility, it gives you the ability to have a system more designed for you. If we're there as a community, largely thinking that's what we should have, then maybe we're at the right time in our sort of evolution to make this matter. Wishful thinking, perhaps.
Just a comment, I'm looking at the acronym NISO and national for whom?
Yeah.
Why is it not international? Why is it not some guidelines? Because I mean, I come from the West Indies, we're in the Caribbean, and our dynamics and cultural interfaces, some of them, they're so unique, they're so different. So I am concerned about that national to whom? And
Yeah.
for what? And exactly what does it mean? I think of colonialism one time, you're imposing a national structure, I might, let's say I become a part of this community, but it's not national for me.
No, I
You
understand.
understand what I'm saying? I have an issue with that term.
Yep,
Yeah.
it's the organization that we have that seems to best fit this approach. I think what happens is, yeah, it's a national thing, but the concepts will be concepts that you can apply wherever. And you'll have the knowledge that comes from this to make decisions about how.
So it will be more like guidelines.
That's it. It's recommended
Yeah,
practices.
yeah.
It'll be recommended practices.
Yeah.
It'll be conformance kind of stuff. It'll be visibility into how you can do things and how you can't. And then we can start to get into the tools themselves. And okay, I do want to make that connection. How does it technically work? And so, but yeah, I mean, it's a limitation, but just as I
So
said.
might lead to that type of breakdown from it being.
Yeah, it's not meant to be, this is how it works in the US. It's meant to be, this is how it should work in the library community. And so NISO is more wide reaching than the North America. So I think you'll find that the output and the outcomes of these things will be just as applicable to you as it may be to a public library in Wisconsin or Michigan.
So then it's not transformational versus incremental then, in that sense, because you can take bits and pieces of it and increment it as necessary in your environment, given your particular environment.
I think so.
Like national, I suppose.
Yeah, that's just the name of the organization. I wouldn't
Yeah,
get too
I know,
caught up on
I
that,
know,
but
yeah.
I think they want to be globally impactful, if you will. Did you have something?
I wonder, if kind of, is it connected to like creating this kind of folio marketplace where, you know, like some of those great, you know, like things can help us, you know, hopefully.
You know, somebody brought that up in one of the sessions today. Hey, what about that? What about that idea of any application can sit and be plugged into Folio? And when we were first sort of in the early days of Folio, for those who were kicking around then, I remember talking about, well, let's just say, I don't know, vendor X, I could use specific names, but I have an acquisitions application. Well, maybe I want to make that for sale. Doesn't have to be open source, but work well with Folio. So if you are not interested in the Folio one that was developed by the community, you could plug mine in because we've made this thing work. You know, if that's the mindset, then we win, right? Because, hey, whatever you guys want to do, we'll make it available to you to do it. And if we can get to that point, then we're good. So yeah, would it be cool to do that kind of thing? Sure, but that's sort of the ideal in my view anyway, is to make those things available. All right, we're down to the end of the day. Any final words of wisdom, anybody? I certainly don't have any, but, thank you all so much. I appreciate, those on. If anybody would like if anybody has any interest in, actually joining this, I probably breezed over it, but, this down here at NISO HQ at NISO.org, or you can certainly reach out to me if you'd like to be part of this community. So thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care, folks online. Bye-bye.